By 1523, Gustav Vasa had defeated the Danish king of the Union, Christian II. On the 6th of June that year, Gustav Vasa was elected king of the new nation-state of Sweden. It was a time of unrest. The Danish were in no way beaten, and in the forests of Småland there were rebellious farmers who were trying to overthrow the Swedish king. To defend his throne, Gustav Vasa's plan was to renovate a number of strongholds. In Vadstena, however, he built a new one. Vadstena was strategically well located. A stronghold there, together with an installation in Jönköping, would be able to defend Sweden from attacks from the south. Just like several other strongholds of the Vasa era, it was built with 4 round turrets, connected by defensive ramparts and surrounded by a moat. Loopholes constructed in the tower enabled defenders to shoot in all directions. The main building was intended for the garrison of the stronghold. The king's residence was a timber building in the courtyard. 2 square towers housed, among other things, a cottage bakery, a kitchen, and prison cells. The billet on the 2nd floor of the main building is part of the castle that has been preserved from the first construction phase. It was not until the reign of Gustav Vasa's son, Johann III, that the castle was transformed into an imposing Renaissance building. Johann III worked closely with the Dutch master builder Arend de Rooij, who was inspired by the teachings of the famous Italian Renaissance architect Andrea Palladio. According to Palladio, the height of the ceiling should be in proportion to the area of the room. The larger the room, the higher the ceiling. This is evident above all in the 2 uppermost floors. Under the supervision of Johann III, the large Hall of State was built. The room was used for both meetings of the National Council and festivities. However, the warrior figures with their flamboyant headgear painted in the window niches of the room were probably added after Johann's death. Renaissance ideals were strongly influenced by ancient Greece. Symmetry was a watchword, and geometric shapes were the basis. The rectangular window openings at Vadstena Castle and their regular spacing typify this. The portals of the porch to the wedding hall are reminiscent of classic temples, with pilasters at the side and the triangular pediment above. In the porch, both the floor and ceiling are preserved in their original state. The wedding hall itself was built in the 1580s. The murals in the room are probably by the Dutch artist Arend Lambrechts. He also executed the compartment paintings at the top of the window niches in the Godegård room. Johann III was deeply religious and had churches built in many castles, as in Vadstena. In the west wall of the castle church, you can see parts of the walled-in columns that originally supported 3 arches. However, the open arcade was walled up at an early date. This was probably because the columns were not sufficiently strong to support the powerful and unusually high roof arches. As you walk around in the castle, you will be able to see several traces of similar walled-up arches. Construction projects continued after the death of Johann III. Fire broke out in the east part of the castle in 1598, and renovations became necessary. The west part of the 3rd floor was built in the beginning of the 17th century. It includes the small Hall of State, a hall for festivities which was built under the supervision of Christopher Murmestare. The murals in this room were hidden for a period under a layer of whitewash. However, the whitewash was removed in the 1940s and the walls can now be seen in their original state. The window niches to the north have old, well-preserved benches. 3 squares have been inscribed in one of them. They were used to play the ancient board game Nine Men's Morris. West of the small Hall of State, there is a 4-room dwelling suite. The suite was used by, among others, the widow of Karl IX, Christina of Holstein-Gottorp. 2 of the rooms still contain original paintings on the ceiling. There are also original door frames with wrought iron fittings. In 1602, under the supervision of master builder Hans Flemming, a team of masons was commissioned to carve out the ornamented east wall of the castle. On the gable wall one can see the coat of arms of Duke Johann and sculptures symbolizing faith, hope and charity. On the west ornamental gable wall one can see the Swedish coat of arms and the letters GARS 1620. They denote Sweden's king at the time, Gustav II Adolf, and the year when the gable wall was completed. The sculptures on the gable walls have been replaced by copies. The original sculptures now stand in the northwest cannon passages. Vadstena Castle is today the best preserved Renaissance castle in the Nordic countries. The Renaissance ideal had reached Sweden during the reign of Gustav Vasa, but it was above all his 4 sons, Erik, Johann, Magnus and Karl, who were inspired by the ideas spreading through Europe at the time. During the reign of Gustav Vasa, the king and his court had no permanent abode. The king travelled around with his court from one royal castle to the next, utilising the taxes that were collected. In addition to the royalty and their attendants, the court comprised cooks, jesters and musicians. The otherwise silent and practically deserted castle was filled for a time with laden tables, music and song. Food for the guests was prepared in the master kitchen. The swill chute was at one of the kitchen windows, and you can still see the chute in the window niche. When the stores were empty, everyone moved on to the next castle and the next treasury. The train of carts trundling across the drawbridge was long, since it included kitchen implements and furnishings. Today the castle may seem empty and austere, but this is not unique. It was empty for periods, even when it was in use. When the sons took over power, they were granted duchies and castles to live in. Duke Magnus received Vadstena Castle. He was interested in culture, and records show that he owned several musical instruments. Duke Magnus also enjoyed ball sports, and was wont to use the castle courtyard as a tennis court. Magnus never married, but he had at least 3 daughters with different mistresses. One reason may have been that while still young he began to slip into the mental illness that would mark the rest of his life. In winter 1566, Magnus was cared for in Vadstena Abbey. Erik was so concerned that Magnus might injure himself that he ordered bodyguards to watch over him. Magnus's mental condition was changeable, and tradition has it that he could become violent on occasion. A papal legate by the name of Posevino visited Vadstena in 1580. He was given accounts of the Duke having 3 nuns abducted from the abbey and killed. Another story tells of when Duke Magnus one day looked out of a window in the castle and saw a mermaid in the moat. Magnus dived from the window and tried to catch her. It ended in him almost drowning. Both Johann and Erik seem to have been deeply sympathetic towards their confused brother. Over the years they tried many different remedies to help him. However, in 1572, his mental condition was considered so poor that he lost his duchy and inheritance to the crown. Duke Magnus died in 1595, and his tomb is in Vadstena Castle Church. The initially so cordial relations between the brothers Erik and Johann deteriorated in time. Years of discord between the brothers finally led Johann to begin to make plans for an uprising Together with the youngest brother Karl, Johan captured Vadstena castle, and the building was used as the headquarters of the uprising. At the castle they assembled a rebel army, which then marched on Stockholm and overthrew King Erik XIV. Johan later became King of Sweden. While the Vasa sons fought among themselves, the Danes took the opportunity to march into Sweden. Under the leadership of General Daniel Rantzau, a Danish army carried out a raid on Vadstena. The Swedes were unprepared for an attack, and the defences therefore were not strong enough to protect the town. The people left their homes and sought shelter in the castle. The Danes plundered and burned large sections of the town and also set fire to the abbey church. They did not, however, manage to take the castle. Karl, on the other hand, managed to occupy the castle once more when he seized power from Johan III's son, King Sigismund. It was the last time the castle featured in combat. As early as the 17th century, the castle began to fall into ruin. The castle was used to stockpile cannons and as a granary. For a while it was also a county jail and a weavery. The damp in the rooms was seen as beneficial to weaving linen. At the end of the 18th century, the square tower on the courtyard was demolished, and in 1847 Parliament decided that the decaying ramparts would meet the same fate. The ramparts were cleared away and the material used to build the harbour jetty in front of the castle. The moat became Vadstena Harbour. In 1899, the National Archives moved into a part of the castle. The archives are still there today and are the oldest archives in Sweden. The National Archives manage hundreds of shelf meters of archived documents and are open to everyone. In 1982, a project was started to rebuild the ramparts. Instead of filling them with earth, vast premises were created inside the ramparts. Today, the National Archives use for storage both parts of the castle and the ramparts. The square tower was not reconstructed until the second half of the 1990s. Much of the exterior that the castle had in its golden age in the 17th century has been recreated. The castle building is also home to Visit Vadstena and Vadstena Academy. Visit Vadstena is a cooperation project between local players who are working to showcase all that is worth seeing and doing in Vadstena. Vadstena Academy gives young artists in the world of opera and musical theatre opportunities to develop. It is also behind music productions and operas, at the castle among other things. Focus often returns to the Renaissance. Within these walls, almost 500 years of festivities, power struggles, madness, fires and decay have passed review. For centuries, Vadstena Castle has stood the test of time, and it is today the best preserved Renaissance castle in the Nordic countries. The National Property Board of Sweden manages the castle in such a way that its doors are open to you. The behind-the-scenes activities change, but the castle remains. The National Property Board manages many buildings and settings in Sweden that are of great cultural, historical value. They are part of our common heritage and future. We want you to see them. Half the kingdom is yours.
Per Jesus man bonamik, que nos salvará la nit, dit tot mal que on sedor.